Welcome back to another live stream. Fun show. I would say consequences facing the world that it's worth talking about. Not that it wasn't worth talking about when it started, but the news was all over it. Everybody was all over it. We want to wait till we got some concrete detail and we could break it down, talk about it, and figure out what's going on. Leave your questions in the chat. We'll get to them. Remember, put a question in front of your question. I'll bookmark it. We'll get one of the guys to answer it for you. Stay tuned.
You are now relearning economics.
Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe button, hit the notification bell so we can be together forever. Like I said, you got a question, put it in the chat, put a Q, put a question so I know it's a question and I can bookmark your question. And we can do that if you're watching this after the live stream, but you can watch this as a YouTube video after it's live. You put your comments underneath the video. That always helps. Make sure you hit that like button. Every member super chats will get priority. We got a bunch of the guys here today. We got Steve. We got Mike. We've got Daniel Sanderson in the house. Believe it or not, he's back. We might have Dave too. So let's bring on the guys. Let's bring them on. I'll bring them on one by one. Mike, how you doing?
My man. Good to see you, Ty.
Oh, yeah. It's always great to see you.
Good.
Yeah. What haircut?
I noticed. I noticed. I was told by a very senior person once, a gentleman should never look like he needs a haircut or just had a haircut. Oh. Having said that, I had mine yesterday as well, so we're haircut brothers. So it's all good.
So basically, over the last, let's go 2 days into the future and 2 days in the past, I've looked like I need it or had a haircut. So I'm in that shitty phase of that theory you just put out there. I've noticed.
You kind of had the Einstein hair last week, the crazy,
Yeah, it was getting. It's still I still do the crazy thing, but I've noticed getting haircuts hides the gray. I'm at that age now where I'm at getting to the salt and pepper age. So I have it spotty and it's really coming in on the sides. So if I just get that buzz down, trim a little bit of the top, I'm looking fresh again, looking like I'm 22 all over again.
You gotta do what you gotta do, Ravages of time.
Let's bring on let's bring on Daniel next because it's been a while.
There he is. Dan the man. Dan the man.
I could say I'm speaking from the salt and pepper. Look at that, right? So I know how you're feeling, Ty.
Yeah.
And I think you still maintain the gentleman status, and here's why. Here's my theory. Because you're not cleanly shaven, right? He's got that like stubbly kind of thing. I think he could pull it off.
Yeah.
He looks like a modern man.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm just gonna stick my bottom
look, contemporary look.
Put my big jaw at the bottom, get that cut of the jib looking good, and I'm fitting right in there. GQ, I think we call him. Who are we gonna bring up next? Let's bring in Dave.
Howdy.
Hey.
Hey.
Oh, we got a
What's
lot
up, guys?
of people
Hey, I
here
haven't.
today.
I go away for a few weeks, and World War III, end of the world starts. What's going on? What have you guys been talking about?
We've avoided it until you came back.
Right. Okay. No, I thought you started it. Something you said.
Well, it's possible.
It's
You know, I
possible.
have
Pretty
my minimal
controversial.
social media reach can be quite incendiary.
Incendiary.
Very
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
that.
Good use of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. The vocabulary just expanded like 300% on the show just with one word. Very, very impressed with that. It's nice to be back, though. Sorry I've been away. Yeah, life got busy.
It sounds like you were working and putting food on the table and feeding your
I
family.
was.
So that's like okay, you know. So.
Slight reinvention of the business and all sorts of things. I'm going after defense contracts now.
Oh, geez,
yeah.
you should now instead of
Timing
Halliburton.
is good.
By the way, anybody that doesn't know
Burton.
me, anybody that doesn't know me, I'm taking the piss. I'm the biggest pacifist ever. I would never do that. But yeah, maybe I should be.
Let's bring on the last guy. This is going to be a pack. I'm going to have to rotate some of you guys in the background in and out. So.
Hey, Daniel. Good to see you, man.
Hey. Yeah, likewise.
Let's bring on Steve.
Now we go from salt and pepper to pure salt. The only black hairs I've got left, I'm not going to show to you. Apart from
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Why the hell does that area never go grey? Well, it does partly go grey, but everything else, you know, it's the visible stuff that shows the age. The invisible stuff, God knows. There's something weird in our biology there.
Steve, maybe you just need to get out there a little more, and you can.
Oh, do I now? Yeah. I think I'll stick with just the salt. Thanks very much.
All right, so let's talk about the Iran war. In the pre-show, I was talking to Mike, and maybe Dan had joined in. You know, we had the war start. I kind of stayed away from it. The 24-hour news cycle was covering it fine enough. But I think we're at the point now where we're seeing some real consequences. When I say real consequences, I'm not talking about market fluctuations in a barrel of oil. I'm thinking about things like Southeast Asia, the Philippines right now, which have declared an energy emergency, real tangible supply shortages, specifically of oil. Fertilizer's another issue. We're kind of at that stage now, so it's worth discussing. So I'll start with you, Steve. We're a month in now. You know, we're seeing some of the things I just highlighted. What are your thoughts if this ends tomorrow? You know, Trump just packs his bags, walks away, and then goes home. Or if this persists longer into the future, let's say 6 months, 1 year, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, God. Heaven, I mean, we can't afford a week of this bloody conflict, because what it's doing is cutting off absolutely critical inputs to production for the entire economy. And this is, again, where the junk economics, I was actually talking with Michael Hudson just a couple of minutes ago on the David Graeber Institute, and he came up with the term junk economics. The junk economics who we're all fighting against, the neoclassical way of thinking, I think is partly why this war is having such a dramatic effect on the global economy that most people weren't anticipating, because conventional economics teaches you that there's perfect competition. So there's millions of suppliers for every possible good. And therefore, if one part gets taken out, who cares? There's plenty of others to take their place. And equally, the theories that they teach leave out the actual input-output system that produces goods and services. If you go back 40 years, you know, back when I was merely your age, Ty, the type of economics that dominated the mainstream then was what they call computable general equilibrium. Everything's equilibrium with neoclassical economists. But when they meant computable general, what they meant was they had an input-output table to show how industry X depended upon industries A to Z to produce its output. And therefore, you know that if there was some part of that industry, the inputs that fell, then you know there's going to be physical consequences for the other industries as well. And this is what was common back in the time of the last oil shock back in the 1970s. Computable general equilibrium was the form of neoclassical economics. Now, when these morons from the original called real business cycle mob and now dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models, they all work within a model in which there's only a single good being produced, and they don't have any of the input-output dynamics at all, and they talk about equilibrium through time rather than equilibrium at a point in time. They're completely ignorant about the physical system that produces goods and services. So they're not even aware that if you cut off supply from some part of the world, particularly of energy, then you're going to have impacts upon goods and service production in the rest of the world. And this is, we're losing such critical inputs out of the war and the blockade of the Straits of Hormuz that this is possibly going to cause the biggest downturn since the Great Depression. Something at the order of 10% of GDP could disappear, courtesy of losing the oil, losing the fertilizer, losing the sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid, which is such an important input to so many production processes, losing helium, which means we lose both microchips and potato chips, because you need sulfur dioxide. There's so many things that are necessary. We lose agriculture. And if we lose agriculture, then it isn't just a case that GDP falls a bit, a case that large numbers of people on the planet will starve to death. And that's what we face in 2026.
Dan, since it's been months since you've been on the show, give your philosophical take on, what's occurred in Iran. I'm sure you've been watching the news, unless you're, I don't know, hiding under a rock. What's your opinions on it? Just throw it out there. What's your opinions on if it persists into the future? What are the implications we can face?
Yeah, well, being the economic show that this is, I really liked listening to how Steve kind of painted that picture. And as I was listening to what Steve was saying, it was persistent in the back of my mind, comparing the neoclassical to his discipline. And I'm thinking to myself, how much of it is a human ethical claim, right? And of course, he finished with exactly that point, is that this is a humanity issue. And, so hence it's a huge responsibility. I'm trying to, maybe I'd throw this back at Steve and I'd say, look, what does a world with neoclassical look like in terms of reactionary policy making, right? We know the system's better, at least that's the claim. I mean, that's what we've been banging on that drum for years. So, I mean, how would this example of an Iran war, a counterfactual, how would it have unfolded if we had the power of of your economics?
Well, what we would never have had. I mean, the war is caused by a madman. Let's just get frank about this. It's a lunatic in the White House that has enabled this war to happen, because it appears to have been it's an objective of the Zionists in Israel to attack Iran for decades, and they could never find an American president dumb enough to do it or compromised enough to do it until Trump came along. So without Trump, this wouldn't have happened. But secondly, if you understand the physical dependence upon energy, then you realize that if you lose energy, you lose GDP. Now, I can quote neoclassical papers. I can actually find the papers where they say this sort of thing. A bunch of German economists tried to estimate, using conventional economic theory, neoclassical theory, what would happen if there was a 10% fall in energy. When they were looking at the early impact of the Ukraine war. And their conclusion, using neoclassical theory, was that a 10% fall in energy would cause a 0.4% fall in GDP. In other words, trivial. Okay, but that's the way that their model of production goes. They say that production depends upon three inputs: technology, labor, and capital. And when you add energy, you get a fourth input. But the extent to which that those sectors affect depends upon their share in GDP. So because energy is only 5% of GDP or 4% of GDP in their calculations, therefore a drop in energy causes a fall in GDP of 0.04, which is almost trivial. Now, when you look at the real data, and I'm going to see if I can push my luck again and share a screen, the link is absolutely 1-for-1 between energy and GDP. So if you lose energy, you lose GDP. And that is just to show that particular element there, way it comes up. And I know this annoys you, Ty, but it's worth people seeing it. Energy is GDP. On the left-hand side, you've got energy measured on petajoules on the left-hand axis, gross world product in United States dollars on the right-hand axis. They're 1-for-1. And what's even more remarkable is that the the change in energy is identical to the change in GDP. So if we have a 10% fall in energy, we get a 10% fall in GDP.
Holy crap.
Okay, now that scale, that's obvious when you look at the data. It's obvious when you work with non-orthodox economics, which understands the role of energy in production. Neoclassicals have no idea of that. So if we've been aware of that and somebody suggested, let's invade Iran, you said, you've got to be out of your effing mind. No, we're not going to do it. That's absolutely disastrous. So if we had realistic economics, even with a fool like Trump as president of America, they wouldn't have gone in.
Dave, I'll get you to chime in next. Just
Yeah,
with
sure.
all your thoughts over the last month.
To me, it's crazy that this has been talked about for like 40 years, that the Strait of Hormuz is this vulnerable to the global economy, right? So it's been talked about, but we've carried on thinking, well, we don't need to worry about that because we'll either never have a war, or when it happens, there'll be, like Steve has suggested, the neoclassical response would be, well, of course, the economy finds a way, sort of thing. Whereas, actual fact, what it's done is basically shown that we have an aorta in the global economy that's now been completely snarled up. So having a literal heart attack, which is in the post. So I just find it astonishing that one, this has been known about for a long time. Everybody's talked about it. The Iranians obviously were going to use it as a weapon. And that two, people are only just now thinking, oh, actually, do you know what? Maybe if we put in some more rail and freight across to the port of Jeddah, that might be a good idea. Instead of, why wasn't that on the cards before? But of course, none of this would have mattered if you didn't have somebody that just thought it'd be fun to throw a brick into the washing machine to see what happens at a system dynamics level. For you guys to experiment with. But that's basically what's happened. And we don't know what happens when you throw a brick into a washing machine, but we know that it's bad. So my impression is that for whatever reasons, and there's lots of them, speculation kicking around, Trump decided to go for it, that we've ended up in a ridiculous situation that just shows we can't think and coordinate globally. Even though we can see a brick wall way up ahead, we can't coordinate globally to either drive around it, reroute, or whatever. We just don't have the peak bodies that are able to mitigate these sorts of things. That's the thing I find most ridiculous, because it's been obvious for decades.
Mike, Dave just talked about throwing a brick into a washing machine, and I think about your saying, this begs for system dynamic modeling, which I thought about a few weeks ago. I just have so much shit on my plate. But Mike, maybe from a systems perspective, what's going on in Iran and what could happen through time in the future, your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do when this live stream ends is go throw a brick in my washing machine to see what the hell happens, because I never heard that one.
Good system to the next model. Yeah.
Maybe
you should model it before you do it, Mike.
And then see if it predicts
Trump.
Correctly.
Dave, you have to do the model first of all, then do it. Unlike
that's
Trump
the metaphor.
Done it first, then we check out what happens. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that one before. I like that one very much. I'm going to steal that from you.
And then Steve talked about that one before.
Yeah, Steve just reinforced why my profession of economics is called the dismal science by his earlier comments. So, yay, Steve. So there was a famous system dynamics study, famous in the system dynamics community, but unpublished. But I was told about it by several senior people who were involved during the Reagan administration. You might remember Reagan had his Star Wars program back then. He's going to put up the missile shield over the United States. It would knock down all incoming missiles. And, and of course, the Soviet Union at the time regarded it as an offensive weapon, and Reagan was a defensive weapon, and what have you. Well, the study that was motivated was, all right, let's say that Reagan's missile shield works 90%. So 10% of the missiles get through the shield, 90% don't. What happens? So a system dynamics study was commissioned, and they found that under most scenarios, the country survived pretty well. Obviously, where the 10% of the missiles struck, that was no good for them. Bad day for you. But in terms of taking the system down, no, except for one scenario, if it took out oil. And in that case, there was a cascading effect that wiped out everything. I can tell you in the early 2000s, I did some consulting work for Homeland Security, some system dynamics modeling. And the question was in a similar vein. If something bad happens, man-made or natural, to this sector, that sector, this other sector, and stuff starts to cascade, what happens? So certainly the government, at least at that time, was cognizant of ripple effects, cascading through a system, and worried about that. So yeah, the longer this thing goes on, more bad things can happen. However, what I would predict, who knows, if I could really predict the future all the time consistently, I would be a trillionaire and not here. But if you would like me to predict what will happen, I think we have the midterms coming up in November, and Trump does not want $3, $4, $5 in California, $8 a gallon of gasoline or whatever going into those elections. So I would predict he's going to tell the military, wrap this thing up pronto, and let's open up the Straits of Hormuz, get the oil flowing again, and let's move on to other things. And my understanding of the military stuff, I'm no expert in that area by any means, but my limited understanding of what's going on is that, we have a blue water Navy, the United States does, where they're built for being out in the open seas doing stuff. And in an area like the Straits of Hormuz, where really you have a 2 nautical mile corridor, there's like 6 nautical miles where the ships can go through, and there's a territorial thing on either side. So really there's a 2 nautical mile corridor where the tankers have to get through. It's hard for, you can't just stick a carrier there or something like that. F-18 Hornets, they go too fast to handle the big problem, which is mines and the swift boats, the Iranian swift boats. And so what do? Well, apparently the Navy's called up the Air Force and send us Warthogs, the A-10 Warthogs. And they are like a 50-year-old airframe. It's actually my second most favorite aircraft. My first most favorite aircraft is the B-17 for World War II. But I like the Warthog. So the Warthog has that. It's like an airframe built around a cannon. And it makes this burping sound when it fires. And it's slow, but it can linger. It has a large 3-hour flight time on a full tank, where it can just hang around. And if you're apparently in like a F-18 Hornet or something, you're going so fast you can't distinguish a little swift boat from a fishing trawler or something. But the A-10 can, and it can hang around, just blow the hell out of the fast boats, and let the minesweepers come in and clear the straits. And everything else has been taken out. So I think that's what's going to happen, is they're going to finish off the fast boats and demine the straits, open it up sooner rather than later, but certainly in enough time where it won't impact the midterm elections in November. That's my prediction.
So make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, like I said, so we're together forever. I want to actually cover some questions as we go through the show. One of the questions, well, it was a statement. It was kind of interesting, and it was kind of a benefit of war. And it's from Frank, and Frank says, the war may be a way to expand productive capabilities, which could be employed after the war is over. Maybe the president's way of bringing manufacturing back to America. I think he's being a little bit satirical there, but we have seen, and specifically if we look
kind of a long way around.
If we look at after World War II, there were some derivative war benefits from that with technology, and I saw Steve shaking his head, so I'll get your opinion first, Steve.
Absolutely no bloody way. I mean, this has damaged an absolutely fundamental component of the productive system of the planet. And like Mike's comment about that war simulation exercise, you could destroy virtually anything except oil. Okay, well, we've taken out, by the looks of it, something at the order of 20% of the world's production of liquefied natural gas. We've also blocked up something of the order of 20% of oil supplies. No way that's going to increase productive resources. And equally, in terms of thinking you might move your production source to America. You can trust Americans after this number? I think this is the end of the American empire. It's empires normally often end in overreach, and I've forgotten the actual name of the emperor, but there was one emperor who was Roman Empire, who invaded Persia in the belief that he'd win a great victory, and he took the oracle's advice that it was a good idea, and the oracles basically said, if you invade Persia, you will defeat a great empire. He didn't realize they were talking about his own empire. So I think this is the final act of the American empire. Now, the scare for me is on the other side of that, the Chinese are going to come out dominant. I think there's going to be a Muslim part of the world now, because part of why Iran is firing weapons at the Arabic states is that the Arabic states are predominantly Sunni Muslim, and the Iranian states are mainly Shiite. And you've got this effectively like the wars we used to have between Catholics and Protestants 500 years ago are still relevant in the Muslim religion. And the Sunnis sided with America in the belief that it'd give them protection against Iran. Well, that's gone out the window. American bases got wiped out at the beginning of the conflict. So far as we can tell, there's so much fiction being broadcast. We have really no real idea of what's actually happened. We only know that in the aftermath. But equally, they know that the Americans didn't defend them. The Americans left them exposed. So the whole idea they can rely upon the Americans to balance the power of the Iranians, I think, is gone. And if anything, this war is going to, I think, potentially cause the Muslim countries to come together and say, we have to cooperate with each other because we can't trust the Christians. This will be the way it's seen.
That's a tangible benefit, see?
Yeah, the tangible benefit, we're going to get a Muslim bloc in the world where Iran and the Arabian countries, which are predominantly Sunni, realize they've got to settle their differences within that religious bloc. And then you'll have a region of the world where it'll be a no-go area for America in particular. It won't be anti-Christian in that sense. It'll be the evangelists in America, because we're talking Christian evangelists really driving. The religious fanatics that are driving this conflict are in America. Okay, and this may actually be ridiculously, one positive benefit of this would be that the Muslim countries realize they've got to come together and overcome some of the differences. Now, that we could never imagine these days a war between Catholics and Protestants. The last time that happened, of course, was in Ireland, 40, 50 years ago. But the wars between the Catholics and Protestants defined Europe between 1500 and 1800. They're gone. With that, I think one of the benefits of industrialization and the growth of modern society is reducing the importance of religious rivalries within the Christian bloc. They're still there in the Muslim. I think this might be the beginning of the end of that process, but it's taking out the bloody world economy to do it.
And there's two potential upsides if we survive this, obviously.
If we, everything's predicated with if we survive.
Well, in the sense that I don't know if there's any clear signal on how much is baked in, even if stuff stopped tomorrow. But let's say we do make it. One upside is I feel like we will have done away once and for all with the evangelical Christian craziness of starting a war here would be the signal for the Messiah returning or something like that, because that's kicking around. That seems to be a motive that is lurking deep within the Trump administration. And the other is that if we do survive it, that it will be a huge push for infrastructure that's renewable and moving away from, if not fossil fuel, at least fossil fuel that comes from specifically the Middle East, because you can't keep relying on this. And also it's destabilizing for the Middle East. It's bad for them that so much oil energy relies on them this way. So I hope those are two upsides, because otherwise this whole thing's completely miserable.
Dan, your thoughts on the commenter's question there about any benefits, and what maybe relative to what Dave and Steve said. There's too many D's. That sounded bad too. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe I haven't hung out with you guys enough, but it seems kind of gloomy on this side of the world, I guess, right? Steve, that the king was the Croesus of Lydia.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of it was he lost the war to the king of Persia. which was Cyrus
and he
the
had
Great.
gold poured into his skull.
Yeah,
that's one of the deals. That's how they executed, and they poured molten gold into his skull.
but I
You
will
would have seen that
say,
happen in the Game of Thrones. That was kind of the
Yes,
basis
that's
of
where
it.
I was thinking. There had
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
Expensive
I
way
will
to
say
go.
that
Mary's
it's-
brother, right?
Yeah, yeah.
what I will say is that it was Cyrus the Great in the Bible, and I know that may not hold a lot of weight for you, but we did get into a segue of evangelical Christians, right? I'm not making any kind of correlation. I'm just saying that inside that piece of Cyrus the Great is a lot of wisdom that the entire world follows, and in particular that region, right? I mean, Cyrus the Great is still one of the most revered figures in history on both sides of the aisle. So I think that's worth looking at.
Actually, I can give one more. Sorry, yeah.
And then the other thing I think, and is there any kind of sentiment across what's happening that is a positive sentiment? And I can tell you guys right away, I have not spent the kind of time you guys have on this at all. But one of the things I did pick up, however briefly, was it seemed like the Iranian people were reacting different. They viewed this as liberation, and I just implore that if there are those voices in Iran that are they're advocating for this change, right? That we don't drown those voices out. And
we've already drowned them.
What do you think?
We've
about
already
that?
drowned them. I mean, the America meddling in the affairs of other countries almost always leads to the opposite effect that America tries to cause. So they thought by going in here, they'd get rid of the leadership, and that'd lead to a revolution in Iran. It led to people who were thinking about a revolution, Iran coming back and supporting the country in what's an existential situation for them. So this, again, forget about any regime change inside Iran. The one place this could lead to regime change in is America.
And also we were sold that line, Dan, on Iraq and others, Libya.
Yeah.
And it gets used, it gets trotted out as a, well, I know there might have to be a war here, but on the plus side, we could get, this benefit for this country. And it just doesn't work that way. And if also, I feel like if that ends up being continually justified as a reason to do the other actual policy, which is to invade for your own reasons, and we justify it, I just think we're giving power away to bullshit arguments, because
it's a bullshit argument for sure.
It's a bullshit argument, not because Iranian people shouldn't have a free and democratic country. I'm 100% a Democrat in the sense, not the American Democrat sense, democratic principles sense, but I just don't believe in the cynicism of America doing it for regime change. I mean, it's a happily mapping onto thing, but actually, I don't think they care.
Yeah, your point is basically they need to come about it naturally, right? Like, and this is the autonomy of the
societies evolve. They don't get invaded and changed for the better.
But I can tell you, Dan is right. On our campus and in Boston, there were thank you President Trump rallies when the war first started, because
were there
of the oppression. Yeah, people were Iranian people over here were thrilled because of the same thing.
The same thing is behind Cuba. I'm not all to talk about taking over Cuba. There's so many Cuban refugees or whatever in America, and they're saying let's get rid of the Cuban dictatorship, etc., etc.
Same for Hussein and Gaddafi, and look how that worked out.
Yeah, so, everything America's touched has been a disaster, and this is just the greatest disaster thus far, and we're just in the beginning stages of it. And the days in which people believe that America could bring about democratic regime change, I mean, give me a break. There've been, Iraq in the first instance. So the first Gulf War you can actually justify to some extent, because it was Saddam who invaded Kuwait to start that, and you're pushing him out of Kuwait. But then the second Great War, totally ridiculous. It wasn't the Iraqis who led it had anything to do with the 9/11. It was anything the Saudis. And then they go to Afghanistan, and what do? They replace the Taliban with the Taliban. They're saying in Persia they replaced Ayatollah Khomeini with Ayatollah Khomeini, the younger. We've gone from somebody who had a fatwa against building nuclear weapons to people who will now be saying we need nuclear weapons because the only countries America doesn't invade are the ones that have nuclear weapons. So, this is complete and absolute disaster. And the Persian people, the Iranian people, may well have been on their own way to internal democratic reform. That is kiboshed that, and now the attitude in Iran is going to be, we have to hold our society together, bury our own differences perhaps in various ways. It won't necessarily be more authoritarian and more fundamentalist, but they're saying we've got to protect our society against the incursion of the Americans.
So if you got any questions, make sure you put them in the chat, put a Q in front of them or question, and I will bookmark them. I've got a couple for myself. I'm going to bang through them because we got all the guys on. Then I can let them keep chiming in. Ty, did you leave Microsoft yet? No, I have not. I am too afraid to put another operating system on my computer at this point. I need to
partition that C drive, baby.
You're in too deep.
Yeah. If I haven't done something, I need to research it first. So I haven't done that yet. Michael D'Souza Cruz, how low will the S&P go? As long as there's bad news in the 24-hour news cycle, it will keep going lower. As soon as there's good news in the 24-hour news cycle, it will go higher as markets
buy, baby. Sales. Everything's on sales. Time to buy.
Yeah. Exactly. We've got a question here, and this one I'll give to Steve because it affects, well, he's not in Australia right now.
How will affect Australia?
Question, how will Iran affect Australia? Steve, concisely answer that, please.
Concisely? Oh dear, okay,
Yes.
What's that word mean? One of Australia is absolutely exposed to this because...
Hold on.
Yeah,
concisely means to the point. It means academically insightful.
I love this expanding of the vocabulary on this show. I'm just very impressed.
I better take an excursion into the dictionary to look up what the incursion means that you've just made into my dialogue.
Wait.
This is superfluous.
But reading behind the lines, right? Steve was implying with the way he talks that this is not a characteristic of Steve, right?
But anyway, let's now answer the question. That was
the nuance of the...
Australia is massively exposed because, for a start, countries that are members of the International Energy Association are supposed to have 90-day reserves of oil. Australia, first of all, it had its oil reserves in bloody Texas. Now it's actually sold those, apparently. It now has its reserves back on its own territory again, thank God. But
apparently they're on tankers, Steve. This is serious.
Are they?
Yeah. So instead of being actually in Australia, they're deliberately on tankers that were going through Asia. Like they know that they can earmark oil.
Oh, look, please. I'm depressed enough about Australia already.
It's going through Asia, and
I wondered where they put the physical facilities, so that's quite likely. That, I can imagine it's they've bought oil tankers, and but they've got 30 days reserve, and that means that within 30, and of course the people are going to start hoarding, so they're going to be buying up stock and running down that reserve very rapidly. But that means that they've got less than a month, effectively, of fuel to survive what's happened now. Now, the scale of Australia is so gigantic that, and there are no rail links from large parts of the food-producing sections of the economy to the cities. So if you don't have diesel, you can't ship the fuel, and the cities run out of food. Now, that's quite a possibility. Australia could have a famine courtesy of this, when it's one of the world's main food exporters, but it relies upon diesel. And it used to have 8 refineries. Now it's got 2. It used to produce about 6 times the level of oil itself that it now has. That's all just running down the physical resource. The oil reserves weren't that large to begin with, but it means that Australia is probably going to grind to a halt in the next month. And if it does, they won't be able to get food into the cities. You could have famine in Australia, which is ridiculous, but it's feasible because they're so dependent upon imported oil.
Yeah, and just to further paint that picture, having lived in Australia myself, we're on the mid-north coast, so halfway between Brisbane and Sydney, and just knowing that the entire east coast is really only linked by food trucks that run up one highway, so that can, for a start, the worry then, and still is, that they could get cut off by fire, and nearly was in 2019 when we were there. Let alone anything else. So it's strung out and supplied only by oil, like Steve's saying. I've always been astonished that Australia doesn't take its food security more seriously. It just doesn't. It just always, everything's just in time.
People would know the comment, the lucky country, to describe Australia. You've heard that phrase? lucky country. Okay. It was actually written by Donald Horne, who was a satirist and a social commentator. And he said Australia is a lucky country that led by mediocre people who rely upon its luck. And now the mediocre leaders we've got with it, rather than having 90 days reserve, we've got 30 days. Rather than being in the country, it was, you're now saying it's in tankers off the coast that they think they can get to come back and deliver the orders. That might be questionable. It's mediocre people making mediocre decisions, largely driven by fundamentally a neoclassical way of thinking. They think a housing bubble is the way you grow an economy. They're incredibly exposed to all this, and this is going to be a real shock to Australia. It's an energy exporting country, and it exports liquid natural gas. It can't refine the natural gas itself. And it loses money. It doesn't even make royalties out of the actual gas that it exports to Japan, buys it back on the other side. So the natural gas is going to run out as well, and the industry could break down in Australia very, very rapidly. Not just agriculture, but also straight, any industry whatsoever, even heating and cooking are going to be damaged by this. So Australia is extremely exposed to this whole thing, and it's almost a fatal wake-up call for the country.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just a couple comments. One is Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize winner in economics. One of the many things he studied was famines, and he pointed out that in many countries that are having famines, they're exporting food. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense now, does it? But yet the incentives are perverse. The other thing is, one of the things we really use system dynamics modeling for is not to forecast the future or anything like that, but to say, how do we redesign the airplane, the system, so it flies better, whatever better means, but not just better, but it's got to be robust. In other words, when a shock hits the system, whether it's an oil shock or something else, we don't want it to crash the system, to crash the airplane. We want it to maybe bobble the airplane a little bit, but then the airplane corrects itself. And, so using system dynamics to design robust systems. Forrester once told me that the way to think about it is each, let's say, company, could be a country, but his example was the economy, is each firm is a boat floating on the ocean. And the ocean is going up and down. That's the business cycle. And he said, you can't do anything in your boat about the ocean, right? The ocean can do stuff to you, but you can't do stuff to the ocean of any consequence. So he said, what you should use system dynamics for is to make sure your boat, your firm, is bobbing on the surface, riding on the waves just fine, watertight and whatever, while your competitor boats are listing and sinking and what have you.
That's
Welcome to listing.
That's
full stop. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay.
He was too concise for you, Ty. You wanted to be more verbose, obviously. Oh dear, we've lost Ty.
No, you haven't lost me, but this internet connection's killing me. But anyways, usually Mike, you kind of dovetail out into dusty books and stuff. We got another question here. This one I'm gonna need an economist answer, so it's gonna be a Mike or Steve question. And he says, question: since the 10-year yield is at 4.46%, what happens when it surpasses 5% as foreign countries sell bonds to purchase oil over $130 a barrel in Dubai? Mike or Steve, do you have any traction on that question?
I think, the oil price is going to go up, so you've got to sell a lot of the things you have to be able to buy the oil to keep things going. I mean, the main thing I'm worried about is not this price of oil, it's the physical availability of oil. And that's why I see a 10% fall in GDP coming out of this, no matter what happens to the price. But with the price going up, yes, if you want to be the country that secures it, then you've got to then hand the dollars over to American oil producers. In that case, you've got to convert your bonds into American dollars. But the intriguing thing is that the Persians have said they'll let through any carrier which is selling oil in renminbi, in the Chinese currency. So we might see sales of American bonds to buy renminbi on the market, and that will drive the dollar down and the renminbi up. So I think this is going to be a change of the monetary system as well, because Americans weaponize everything. Okay? You give an American a dollar note, they think they can fold it into a Colt 45, and that's what they've done with the SWIFT system. They cut Persia ran out of using the SWIFT system initially, so they've militarized everything, including the monetary system. And any country around the world must be thinking, obviously it's having a madman like Trump that leads to stuff to actually happening in the first instance. But even if America gets rid of Trump, can they be trusted ever in the future? And I think the trust, which is a critical part of having a monetary system functioning, whether that's a national one or an international one, that trust is gone. Nobody trusts America anymore after this. Any country that appoints somebody like Trump and take actions like this, you can't trust them in the future. You've got to find an alternative. So whatever it might be, I think this is the end of the American dollar dominating the monetary system of the globe.
Mike, did you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, I think if they don't switch to the yuan or the renminbi, it'll strengthen the dollar. It'll hurt exports and enhance imports, I suppose. That's the first order effect. Then you get the second and third order effects, the ripple effects. I'm not entirely sure, but
next question here. We've got, what do we got? Oh, here's one from Michael D'Souza Cruz, who's always here Michael, you've really taken over Tony Wilson's position on the live
get Tony
stream.
back, mate. Tony might be a pain, but I love the guy at the same time. So
well,
fix it up at some point.
Word is he is having negotiations with me, but I have not heard from him at all.
Oh, I see. So, okay, there's advent of negotiations. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Is the Israel taco war helpful to the degrowth movement?
I'll dive in on that one.
Okay, go for it.
And that is that I think what Trump is giving us is a rehearsal of what's going to happen when climate change really bites. Okay, because climate change is going to mean that there goes your availability of energy, there goes your availability of food. How the hell do you respond? We have, and think it was partly your point, Dave. We've ignored the need to move away from fossil fuels for the last 50 years, and it was going to be global warming that woke us up on that. Instead, Trump, who denies global warming, of course, has given us a rehearsal of what it's going to be like when you can no longer rely upon energy or food production to actually occur. And so the thing is, you've got to get the hell out of oil, get into electrical systems as fast as possible, get away your energy dependence on oil, and move across to renewables or nuclear as a matter of absolute urgency. So Trump's given us, in some ways, a prelude to this. And it's only like a lunatic in the Wall Street in White House enabling that to happen, rather than the complete collapse of the system that will come from global warming if we don't move fast enough. So it may destroy physical resources, reduce GDP and output, cause famines, but then it's think, holy shit, we've got to have sustainable energy systems, and we've got to have sustainable food, and that's the lesson that global warming is going to teach us. So maybe Trump's given us a few years lead ahead of that actually catastrophically happening. It's a catastrophe caused by a fool rather than catastrophe caused by the absolute breakdown of our human systems on the planet.
Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button, hit the notification bell so we're together forever. Daniel, you have a question. I want you to ask it.
Okay. Well, Steve, I don't know if you watched the speech that the Canadian Prime Minister did. Mark Carney did it to Australia's government. But did you have any background on that? Because it seems to me like
I saw his speech to the World Economic Forum where he talked about that I thought was quite intelligent and being brave enough to break away from Trump at the same time. So and it was a good input. What, did he have a speech in Australia as well?
Yeah, he did. And I guess, where I was going with it is that he does seem to be laying the groundwork for like a pan-national alliance with like the middle powers. That's what he calls it. And so he's, I think, pulling together a coalition of, like-minded countries that want to have some stabilizing or like counter options, in response to the United States. Did you sense that at all where you're at, Mike, just being south of the border?
Mike?
I don't, now that one I'm like kind of either in the middle on. I haven't moved my needle either way on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's where you pick up the points if you start to study different countries, reporting on the news. There's subtle things that just are not there, right?
Daniel, America does not pay attention to the rest of the world.
No.
Let's be clear on that.
Well, this is the end of American.
You have to work at it.
I'm prompting Mike, who's such an intelligent guy, that it's like, okay, let's tune into a few of these things, right? And then we want to have your intellect reflect on some of these other things, right? Like, when we look at Mark Carney's speech at the World Economic Forum, right? I mean, it was standing ovations and it was a historical speech. And so, we want you to weigh into that, like put it into the weight of evidence inside the mind of fellow Americans, at least yourself.
I didn't see the speech.
I think we are seeing the end of subservience to America.
I think so.
And it takes a lot of bravery to be a part of the American bloc and to say something critical of America. So Carney did that first. And what I think one of the most intriguing things Carney had to say, I think, was in a speech in China before the World Economic Forum. But he talked about the new system, and he literally said it this way: a new world order. New full stop, world full stop, order full stop, saying basically this is the end of the American system. And the intriguing thing is, and we haven't mentioned it so far, I don't know how many are aware of it, this is the 250th anniversary of America this year. And the normal story is we see empires lasting, about 300 years, 200 to 300 years. This I think we'll take this particular date as the end of the American empire dominating the globe. It'll still have the military dominance. That's the terrifying thing. It's still got those nuclear weapons, but its capacity to push other countries around and the capacity of it to get other countries to go along with its idiocy, like Australia's invaded every country that America's invaded so far. I certainly hope Australia doesn't invade bloody Iran. I mean, that would be ludicrous if Australia sent troops to that. Trump's trying to get the rest of the world to send troops. Most of them saying, interesting thought. Yeah, we'll think about it. We'll say some nice words and support you on that front. And oh dear, our ships seem not to be working at the moment. Don't really think we can get troops there in time. Terribly sorry, Donald. This stuff, the obsequiousness to America has ended.
I don't know. Australia's so far up America's ass so they went to Vietnam. Whereas even the Kiwis went, fuck that. You crazy? Yeah.
The Canadians didn't go into Vietnam, and Australia's capacity to support America and its stupidity is unrivaled. But I think this one is going to draw the line. Hopefully. Australia won't be stupid enough to go into Iran, I hope. And if there was,
did you just low key say that Canada's smarter than Australia?
I did, and so is New Zealand. Okay. I would rather be a New Zealand or a Kiwi or a Canuck than an Australian.
Steve is making friends here.
And recorded. Yeah.
Okay, we got a fun question. I'll get Dave to start with it. So the question is for Michael: which is more dangerous to humanity? 1, global warming; 2, nuclear war; 3, a large asteroid hit; or 3, assholes in public office. What's your ranking, Dave?
Actually, the fourth one, I almost did holes in public roads, because those are the ones that have been killing me lately. But look, I think, okay, so timelines are important here, though. So if the timeline is long enough for global warming, right? But at any given moment, nuclear war is still there. I've been to see the stage show with Steve Coogan in London of Dr. Strangelove, which reminded me just how brilliant Kubrick's.
I watched that a couple of days ago. It's magnificent.
It's so good.
It's incredible.
You can't fight in here. This is the war room. So it's brilliant, but it also reminds you that those threats haven't gone away. So nuclear war is definitely number 2. I think the order is pretty good there, actually. Although 4, obviously, you got your rogue effect of 4 with someone like Trump.
I think it's 1. It's 1, 2, 4, 3.
Yeah.
Hold on. Stop. too much crosstalk. This is Dave's turn.
Okay.
So let's Dave from
okay, so short term
give your order.
Short term 4-2. 3's out the way. We don't know. 3's not going to.
What kind of weird math? Just say it in order.
4.
Okay.
2.
Okay.
1.
Okay.
3.
Okay, now your turn's over. It's Daniel's turn. Daniel, give your order for the list here. Sorry, Michael D'Souza Cruz. I'm trying. The guys here are being very difficult. Dan, go ahead.
Okay. Well, 1.
1.
Okay. I think followed by followed by like the metaphor of 3, and then 2, and then 4.
Okay, the metaphor 3. Mike, you go.
Oh, number 1 is 4. 2 is global warming. 3 is nuclear war, and number 3 is the last one. The asteroid thing is
okay. Mike, thank you. That was you did it. Mike, you are a good person. You truly are. I
followed orders.
You're a good soldier. I'm really proud of you. Steve, now I know Steve is not going to be able to follow orders, so I left him to last. Steve, go ahead. What's your order on this list?
1, 4, 2, 3.
Holy shit. Oh, you really fell into line there. You really started doing the right mark.
Now I'll waffle. Okay, I'll be a concise waffle for you. But yeah, global warming that's the absolute, and that turns the timeline 10 years if we're lucky. So what if you're an asshole in public, that's now jumped ahead, which makes 2 more likely, and 3 is off with the fairies at the moment. But yeah, so 1, 4, 2, 3.
All right. So my order in long term is 1, 2, 4, and 3. In the short term, mine is 3, 2, 1. Up. No. 4.
No, you got that wrong.
2, 1, 3 is my short term. For Tony, thank you. This was these are the kind of questions I want to do because it just causes so many disturbances in my mind when interacting with other people answering these
Tony?
questions.
That was Michael D'Souza Cruz.
Michael, I'm got Tony on my brain. Feel bad about Tony.
I have to tell Tony that. Okay.
I can't understand you guys, especially you, Mike. Can you understand why there isn't more obvious anger? I mean, proper anger especially from MAGA type supporters. I mean, there's quiet from JD Vance because this is not an isolationist agenda at all. But why are not more Americans on the right really flipping angry about this? Because it doesn't sit anywhere in the policies they thought they were voting for.
Several things, I guess. One is the feeling is we can't have Iran having nuclear weapons. They can't be trusted. They've said we're going to wipe Israel off the map and all that stuff. So no nukes. And, you're not going to voluntarily, not do that. So we give you a chance to voluntarily, then we bomb your facilities. You're still going to do it. Number 2, they were supporting, my understanding is Hamas and Hezbollah, who are doing stuff to Israel, who is our ally. You can't be doing that. And number 3, we can get this once and for all done, going back to the hostages in 79, in the 444 days of the Iranian hostage crisis when they got rid of the Shah and all that stuff. Finally, Trump is finally, instead of dilly-dallying like the other presidents, this is what people are thinking. He's the guy with the stones. He's just going to take care of this. It's going to be done and over, and it's going to be done quickly in their minds. It's not going to be this Vietnam drawn out year after year because the firepower is so different that. So by the time midterms roll around, it's going to be all over, and the Iranian thing will be dealt with, and we move on. I believe that's what the thinking is.
Some of the MAGAs are completely going gaga. I mean, what's the name? The Marjorie, something Green.
Taylor Green, Tucker Carlson.
She's gone completely on the other side. Who's the young bloke, the 24-year-old? Again, I can't. Yes, I follow the events rather than the people, but they are just completely horrified. But it seems so many of the MAGAs just think, that Trump is being their hero, and it's total cult behavior. And but at some point, he's disillusioning anybody who took him seriously in what he said he'd do. But there are people, this is the religious side of America, which is bizarre when you see it from outside and come from a fairly secular society as Australia and New Zealand and Canada predominantly are. The extent to which people say this is all okay because he's going to lead in and he's going to destroy the Antichrist and God's going to turn up on earth and all this sort of ludicrous religious junkism, they can sort of see, this is all God's plan.
It's a pretty solid case when you think about it like that.
The gods that I believe in, I've become religious in my experiences in the last 40 years. I believe that gods do control it, and it's the bloody Greek assholes who enjoy torturing humans and seeing how they react. That's the only explanation that I've got that makes sense at the moment.
So you said last week that you're starting your own religion, though, Steve, right?
Well, I want to call Satanism. We need Satanism as a religion. So I'm willing to be the high priest of Satanism.
The new Hubbard.
The new, well, no, not Hubbard, please. But
turn over 90% of your net worth to Steve.
If you're founding a religion, I'm putting some money in.
You're going to lose it anyway. Might as well go to a worthwhile cause.
So we got an economic question here. It's a pretty relatively good one here. Yeah. Does economic analysis make it more or less likely that countries consider war as viable? And I'm guessing Colin's saying, are economists gathering in rooms with policymakers and politicians saying, you know what, there's a cost-benefit analysis report we just did here, and let's bomb the shit out of the Middle East. Steve, go ahead. I'll let you start with that one.
They don't even come close to thinking about it. Neoclassical economics is all about equilibrium, and the last thing you can handle in equilibrium thinking is a war. So I think what I'd expect, and I know I'll get criticized for this, but I think economists in general would say they're anti-war because obviously war destroys productive capabilities. So you'll get some, I'm sure there are some MAGA economists out there, and there are bound to be economists who think that it's good to disable Iran, yada, yada, yada. But fundamentally, thinking economically makes you anti-war, even if you think delusional economics like neoclassical economics.
Mike, you want to add anything onto that to economists in war rooms?
I'm focused on Michael D'Souza Cruz's comments about SD models of cults. Very good. There is an SD model of charismatic leaders and how that comes about. And there was a guy, he's since passed away. He was an electrical engineer, but he always came to the SD conference every year with a system dynamics model of mystic experiences. So, hey, if you can define it, we can model it.
When I think of economists thinking whether or not war is a good idea, I always think of Milo Minderbinder from Catch-22, who convinced, as quartermaster, I think, that it was a good idea that if the American bases just bombed their own bases and the Germans that he'd convinced to bomb their own bases, everything would be more efficient and they could make more money that way. So that's what they did. That's the kind of thinking I reckon economists have about.
Major.
Yeah.
My wife was
selling all the silk.
She used to. My wife was a nurse, and she used to work for a doctor whose last name was Doctor. He was Doctor. Sidebar.
Mike. Oh, go ahead, Dave. You're going to say
no. I'd run out of gas. Don't worry.
Mike, tell me.
Run out of gas. That's going to happen to a lot of us soon.
Do you like that? Excuse the pun.
Tell me a little more about Michael D'Souza Cruz's question there. Because I like systems, and it doesn't matter if they're social or physical systems.
Yeah.
But when we're describing, as you say, if you can describe a system, what do you need to describe in that system? Are there boundaries that you need to describe? Are there stock flow diagrams you need to describe? What's the description of a system dynamic model?
Of a cult.
Of a cult, and you can relate it to a cult. We can use cult as an example.
we don't model systems, we model problems from a systems perspective, and that allows us to exclude a lot of stuff, right? And just put the important stuff, important to the problem, in the model. You have to be able to define what you mean by this or that concept. Sometimes it's straightforward: people, babies. You say it's pretty straightforward to model that. But when you get into soft variables, such as, the cult following and whatever, it's a little trickier. You'd probably have a model where there'd be a stock of people who are fully in the cult, another stock of people on the fence getting drawn in, and people who are not. And then they can go other way. People can be rescued and broken away, or disillusioned and get out of it. So there's probably a simple 3-stock model. And then you'd have to say, well, what factors would cause people to move around? What causes them to be disillusioned? What causes them to be attracted to the cult? There's probably a positive feedback loop where the more cult people there are, the more cult people there will be, with a word of mouth, and effective, presumably cult people make more cult people. You don't wake up one morning by yourself, decide to join a cult. Somebody introduces you and what have you. So, you'd have to say, so what's the important stuff? I'll get the first time I met Forrester real quick. I was a student and I approached him. I introduced myself, and, he asked me, what are you up to? And I said, well, I start saying all these grandiose things I'm going to model. And he's going, And then when I was finished, he paused, he was thinking, and then he said, well, if you can model all that with 5 stocks, you're an expert. I modeled the world with 5 stocks. And he walked away. And now at the time, I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Oh, no, did I offend him? Or I don't know. But in retrospect, what he told me was, keep it simple, right? I can model the world in 5 stocks. So you got all this stuff, what are the main, and I think, and then those models are easier to understand than a giant, 200 stock model with stuff going everywhere, right? So.
Well, here's a follow-up question then, Mike, because, and Jay talks about it in the book, Industrial Dynamics, where he discusses aggregation, when it's appropriate and maybe when it's not appropriate. As a system dynamicist, how do you decide, you know what, I can just aggregate that, have one system state and be done with it, or no, I need a large aging chain with that, or some sort of an array, and I need to really build it out? What's the decision process there?
Go simple first, and you can be more complicated later. That's the first thing. The second thing I found is it's often due to the audience. Like if you're being paid, often the client will tell you, yeah, you have a stock of work in process. I want you to take that out and put in all 19 steps of my production process. The widget goes here, then here, then here. And I'll say, it's not necessary to do that, because it's just overcomplicating the model. And then that person who's paying you runs that shop floor and tells me, I want that 19 steps in there. All right, you're paying the bill.
So you're paying me by the hour, so okay.
Well, I would always say you're going to pay me more money to do that, because it takes some time. I don't care. I want that in there. Like, okay, it's not. I'm telling you, as the consultant, the modeler, it's not necessary. We're not getting any new information, but if you want it, all right.
But this thing about cults, I mean, the main thing about a cult, you've got a charismatic leader, so you need that. You need to have a cult prediction being made about what's going to happen by the charismatic leader. And then you need a divergence between what the cult leader says is going to happen and what actually happens. And the question is, how do people stay in the cult when the predictions keep failing? And then that what you'd have therefore is the cult, cults give you identity. Cults define who you think you are. So there's a strong reinforcement to keep you inside the cult. But then you get the people who the divergence between what the cult says is going to happen, what actually happens, gets to be critical, and those people break away. Do you know anybody? Like I do know, I have a couple of people I know who've left a cult. Have you got any personal knowledge like that? Anybody? Knowing somebody who's left a cult?
You keep some strange company.
All I can tell you is the first time I went out to visit Forrester in the System Dynamics group, John Sturman met me at the door, and he said, "I'm an economist." He goes, "Oh, we'll let you in anyway." And then after they got to know
economists are a cult. Yeah.
Well, no. After they got to know me and I studied with them, they said, "Welcome to the cult."
Well,
one more of us, one less of them.
Yeah, I mean, you have
well,
a way of
Forrester was a charismatic leader.
He was, yeah.
So Jay was not a warm and cuddly guy.
I've gathered what you've told us about him. Yeah, anything but.
If you went up to him and said, "Hey Jay, how's the family? How's your grandkids? How about those Red Sox or something?" He would get all agitated. He'd just walk away. He wouldn't even say anything because he just didn't know how to handle that. If you say, "Tell me all about how you came up with world dynamics," he would go off and tell you for 45 minutes everything that he did.
It sounds a bit like Dirac. I mean, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but that's physicist Dirac. Apparently, the people say the weirdest person they ever met. And so there's something, on the autism scale or something of that nature. But, quite a difficult person to know by the sounds of it. I've heard the same about Donella Meadows. I don't know, but equally she
was also.
She was difficult. But
here's the thing. But yet people followed him. I mean, his students, even if he beat them around, his students, whatever, never left him. They would always come back, always be involved with the field, going to meetings with him, helping him. So he had a charisma with respect to sort of academic things, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah.
And people followed him. And so I think, cults probably need a charismatic leader of some sort, at least to get it going. And there's something about them that people really like, and they'll follow him, believe him, and whatever.
We're very social species. Its identity, its tribe. Is there any argument though for deliberately making a kind of positive, cult? Where
I think there is.
Social engineering, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I that's why I talk about it. I mean, only facetiously, but now I think it's actually a seriously interesting idea. We have religious cults, and cults are talking about people but sharing a belief system, and that belief system, to some extent, become impregnable. The people won't change their beliefs even if they've got to wait 2,000 years for the Messiah. They'll continue waiting, and they'll die waiting for the Messiah, and then their kids will do the same thing, and on you go. And that's something about humans. We are belief-sharing creatures. We think we're intelligent. We can reason abstractly and so on. But what tends to define people's behavior is sharing beliefs and defining themselves by the beliefs they share. And I saw one person in my newest book, which I've got to finish hopefully by June, July. I start off with an example from a school class, and I finish up by saying that who's the guy who said the comment about it's very hard to persuade somebody to change their minds when their income depends upon them not changing their minds? Sinclair it was, I think. Anyway, I said, well, that's Sinclair Davidson. I've forgotten the actual name, but that's not as important as somebody believing something, because somebody who's paid to say something won't fly themselves into a tower block. Somebody who believes will. And so belief is more important than logic in that sense, or even self-interest. So I think if we're going to ever have a sustainable civilization on this planet, we have to have religion based around the fact that the small blue dot that Sagan got us to take a photograph of Voyager looking back at the Earth, and it didn't even take up a single pixel in the photograph that Voyager could take at that time. Sagan argued really heavily with the NASA engineers to say, turn the craft around and take a photograph of Earth from the perspective of, I think it was Jupiter at the time, and then said that one blue dot, everybody every battle you've ever read about, everything that's ever happened that you're aware of happened on that single blue dot. And that gives you something which unites everybody in a way that is very different to any other religion. So I think in some ways, if we're going to have a survivable future, we have to come up with a religion. Upton Sinclair, thank you very much, Ben. It is hard to get a man. That's less important than the rigidity of belief that we have, and we define ourselves by the beliefs. So we need beliefs which say we have to talk about the uniqueness of life on this planet, the fact that we're all, not only are all humans the same species, all our species are related to each other by the process of evolution that led to life in the first instance. This is the only spot in the universe where we know supports life. That has to be the basis of our religion. And I think it's absolutely delightful that Sagan is one character removed from pagan. So we go back It's the pagan Sagan religions. That was what we need to have a
I
sustainable
love
future for
pagans.
humanity.
I think we should talk about pagans more as well. Look,
Yeah.
I'm all on for Saganism. I love it, Steve. I'm in.
You can get a lot of tax breaks, at least in the US, if you're a religion.
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought about that particular avenue yet. Okay, yeah, let's get tax breaks. Let's form the Sagan religion, the Church of Saganism.
I love it.
I'm willing to be the first pope. It's a sacrifice, but I'll make it.
Yeah, I'm on in on the ground floor. And
you're now a cardinal. I now ordain the cardinal in the Church of Saganism. There you go.
Church of Saganism. I mean, it made sense back then when in the age of space exploration early on, it felt natural. And that's why, Kennedy's we all breathe the same air made sense, because we suddenly had an expanded view of the planet. Where did that go? I don't understand why that level of...
You can blame economists for it. And what happened in the 1970s, that's what led to the... NASA's budget is 1/10 of what it was in the 1960s. And the pressure of, the attempt to get to the moon before the Russians, after Russians put Sputnik up into orbit the very first time, the very first satellite was a Russian satellite. The very first person in space was a Russian. The very first dog in space was a Russian. All that stuff led to Kennedy's attempt to say, we've got to get a man on the moon within 10 years, which we did. But that could have been a unifying religion for us. And instead, we had the oil crisis of the 1970s. Again, look what we're doing now, another oil crisis. Then that led to the arrival of neoclassical economics. And we then said, the most important thing is to reduce the government deficit. There went NASA. There went that combination. So again, I think mainstream economics and its obsession with equilibrium is why we're in the state we are today.
Thank you, Evolution, for the super chat. It'll go towards the Restream hosting service I pay $50 a month for. That always helps. And on that note, we've had a lot of viewers today. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Leave your comments in the chat or underneath the video if we are no longer live. I have a question here specifically. This one I'm going to give to Dave and Dave alone. Should we conscript Baron Trump? Should he?
No.
Should he have? This one's for Dave. This one's for Dave. You guys fell out of line there already. You guys were doing good earlier, but not now. Dave, should we put a rifle in Baron's hands and march him to the Middle East? Go ahead.
So just the army of one, just Baron Trump, and that's it.
If it's just
part
him,
of the invasion force,
right? If it's part of the invasion force. If you want just him as one troop to be efficient or inefficient,
I don't know. I already feel sorry enough for him as it is. I mean, look who he's got for a dad, and now we're going to ship him off to Iran. I just think it's really cruel. So I feel sorry for Baron Trump. He's not a Jared Kushner or whatever.
Okay. Let me read now. Let's do this seriously because this is it can be a serious question. We've seen wars in the past, and we've seen the privilege of immediate family members of leaders that start wars.
Oh, I see.
Baron's not going to be going to any a battle theater.
Here he has bone spurs.
Okay, I can give you a straight answer then.
Give me a straight answer.
So. I am, by the way, very conflicted about this because I consider myself a pacifist in the system sense. I know that you can't, if someone breaks into my home and it's going to threaten my kids, I'm going to probably try to kill them. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not that kind of pacifist, but a system pacifist as in, I don't believe that we try hard enough to create systems that stop conflict in the first place or don't make them redundant. Right. So I'm a system pacifist. I think the problem that we have at the moment is, we're not seeing the consequences of war enough where you've got you've got no conscription at all. And there was, back in the day when it was compulsory to a point, everyone was exposed to their kids being shipped off. So I think it's a really good point to make. Maybe we should have it. But I'm more in favor of, so instead of just conscription per se, like a national service, and that could mean a lot of things, down to tree planting or whatever, but have 2 years where you're doing something for your country, and it doesn't have to be picking up a rifle necessarily. But I am all for a limited amount of that. But I think it needs to be careful because if you've ever traveled anywhere in like Africa or parts of Asia, like I have, you will come across very quickly Israelis in their gap year kind of thing, where they've been in the IDF, they take a year off and go traveling. They're super aggressive people. Now, it's nothing against them. They need to be a vigilant part of the world that they need to be in. I get that. But the problem with it being heavily militarized, if you're going to conscript people, is you do get a lot of young people that are really aggressive. I didn't like them, if I'm honest. But if it was culturally different to that, if it was like national service, as in you don't have to we're not going to just teach you how to strangle people with barbed wire. We might teach you how to, help villages do sanitation better with long drops or whatever in Africa. If that was what national service was and conscription was for 2 years, yeah, I'm all for it. Fill your boots.
I think the question actually was about, sending somebody that Trump is personally is personally related to, and that's why it won't work with Barron Trump.
No,
they'd
protect him.
It doesn't seem from one year to the next. But yeah, the idea is, this is the sort of thing the Greeks would have done. I don't know it for details, but Greeks would have had laws about, so if you want to bring about a war, then the children of the people who vote for the war have to be involved in the war. And this is, all the cases. It's old men who tell the young men to go to war, and they make sure their own kids don't get in the firing line. So yeah, there's some way in which political decisions have personal consequences. That's what that particular meme is about.
I'm a little bit concerned here. I'm starting to read between the lines. So Evolution or Revolution says this might be my last financial contribution for a while, which would suck because you're about 20% of my monthly revenue from YouTube. But on that note, are you going to war? Is that why your financial contributions are ending? Because that's I'm worried for you. Or are you just
always worried about the oil price? Where he's going to have a job next week?
Yeah. Is there some financial, or are you tired of the show? And if that's the case, what do I need to do to adjust here to continue getting 20% of my YouTube revenue from you? So hit me back in the chat.
You gotta replace me with a supermodel in your
we need more. That's right. We need a permanent female presenter on this live stream. I think that's where the situation lies. We've got a question from Algorithm, and this is interesting. Isn't the axis of evil just a list of countries that refuse to use SWIFT or the U.S. banking system? Mike, your thoughts?
Had never thought about it that way, but that makes some level of sense, I guess. Yeah, I mean, long story short, after World War II, for better or for worse, the U.S. said, "You're all welcome. You would all be, they'd be speaking Japanese in Australia, they'd be speaking German in Great Britain, et cetera, et cetera. You're all welcome. Now we're in charge." And all the stuff fell from that. What went from that? We didn't go with the Bancor. We went to Dexter White's system and so forth, the Bretton Woods system, et cetera. But over time, that starts to fade. And younger generations say, what? Why are we doing this? We don't like getting pushed around or told what to do, et cetera, et cetera. And, the using the SWIFT system, that's been one weapon that's been used to try and punish countries that fall out of favor and what have you, sort of debanking them at the national level and whatever. So, yeah, I suppose there's some merit to thinking about that way. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think this is the end of people taking America seriously, but outside and potentially even inside the country, because America's the country that's been the rogue. The rogue nation on the planet, the most important and dangerous rogue nation on the planet is America. And this is yet another example of it. It's more ridiculous than at previous occasions. But America's the country that's invaded and overthrown other countries. America's the country that's bombed the shit out of other parts of the world. The classic should have been the Vietnam War. They bombed the shit out of Vietnam to stop the Vietnamese invading the rest of the world and communists taking over the world, yada, yada. Who was the next battle the Vietnamese had? Was with the Chinese. And now, which are the countries that are, most dramatically improving the lots of their own populations and growing most rapidly? It's China and Vietnam. So the whole idea that America is the light on the hill. I mean, it's the Dark Lord. I mean, America's treated itself as if it's the it's the Ewoks against the Empire in Star Wars. No, you're not. You're the fucking Star Wars. Pardon the French again. Pardon me, Ty. I've broken the laws yet again. But America thinks of itself as the rebel, and it's actually the evil empire.
I mean, I have no love of the system in North Korea. I mean, it's not like these are the good guys either. So the axis
North Korea is the only example you can find. I mean, China, Vietnam, Iran
as well. I mean,
no. I think Iran has come out of this extremely well.
Well, they're hardly a beacon of light.
But they're not a beacon of darkness in the way America portrayed them overall. And that's coming. The amount of propaganda we've had about Iran and the evil things they're doing and yada yada yada. Then they come out with the sophistication of the attack, the way they've defended themselves in this whole situation. The philosophical intelligence of the Iranian commentators on this war leaves America in the dust. And this is
Saudi Arabia ought to be more on the axis of evil. If you really want to go into human rights.
And so. Yeah, the image that America managed to portray of Iran's behavior, and then you see the Iranians who are coming out and coordinating their defense against the attacks from the Americans and the Israelis, and the intelligence and sophistication of the people who are making Iran's case is a complete flip of the script about them being a bunch of evil, turban-wearing religious fanatics. The turban-wearing religious fanatics are in the White House.
So one of my favorite movies is from
wearing, but anyway,
I think it was from the 1970s.
It's probably a turban. So, yeah. Which movie?
It's 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford and Cliff Robertson, right?
Okay.
And real quickly, you can go watch it. It's quite an old movie, but Robert Redford is a low-level CIA analyst, and he's finds some weird piece of paper that comes in like a fax machine, doesn't know what the hell it is, but it had like a symbol on it. So goes out for coffee, comes back. Everybody in his little CIA station, this is in New York City, and we're in Brownstone. You go downstairs, he's dead. He's like, what the heck happened here? I just stepped out for coffee. And he realizes, I better get out of here. So most of the movie, he's being chased. He doesn't know by who at the beginning, and then it's the CIA trying to kill him too. And then he finally uncovers, like, why is this? And he confronts at the end of the movie Cliff Robertson, who's the head of the CIA, and he says it's about oil. And Cliff Robertson says, yeah, and it was plans for getting Middle Eastern oil. This is, of course, in the 70s, the OPEC oil. And he said, well, that's horrible. And Cliff Robertson says, what do you think the American people are going to say if there's no oil? He said, they're going to say, go get it, and we don't care how.
And that's
And then Robert Redford, they're in front of the New York Times building in New York City when this confrontation at the end of the movie happens. And he said, the camera pans up there and he says, well, I'm going to go tell him at the New York Times. And Cliff Robertson says, you think they'll print it? And the movie ends.
Wow. And okay, I've got to watch that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's real good. And so the thing is, everybody wants to be nicey, or at least the American people, oh, this is terrible. Unless and until they can't run their car and run their lights. And then they're going to say, fix it. And I don't care what the hell you do. Right.
Yeah.
So we've got another, we've got another question here. It's a two-part question from David. So I'll answer the first one. And the second one I'm going to direct to, Steve mostly, but Mike and Dave can obviously chime in. So the first part of the question is, I was super curious of how this will play out in relation to Iran into the U.S. bonds held by foreign nations. Do we see a sell-off, and will it matter? And short answer, no, it won't matter. So when there's a sell-off, there are buyers, right? Okay, so if there's more sellers than there are buyers, that changes the composition of the price of the treasury, which obviously changes the yield. If it is short-end bonds and that yield changes out of the preference of the Federal Reserve policy rate, they will step into the domestic market most likely and purchase a bunch at home. The domestic market will then purchase those treasuries from abroad, and it'll stabilize that yield. If it's more of the long-term US debt, we will see a divergence of yields, long-term yields from short-term yields. And that just happens with the business cycle. The Fed tends to let the longer yields, like the 10-year yield, just go along with the business cycle. However, we have seen in the past that the Federal Reserve will do what's called yield control. So if they don't like the spread between the short end yield treasuries and the long end yields, they'll go into the long term market and purchase there. So ultimately, at the end of the day, quantitative easing, they ultimately they can control those yields, and it's really a nothing burger metric per se. Now, unless there's something catastrophic and the US falls out of favor with the entire world and we have a new reserve currency, that's not going to be a problem in the immediate future. Now, the second part of the question is I'm more interested in getting Steve's answer for it. Question: if we did have the banker, how would it have been able to help developing nations that didn't have energy? Wouldn't they be stuck in a permanent low export, low import scenario? Steve, I'll let you kind of cover it first.
That's where Keynes, I mean, I've got to take my hat off to Keynes. I've reread the Bancor documents recently because I want to see, that's the international system I'd like to see replace the garbage we got courtesy of Harry Dexter White. And when you read it, what Keynes had, first of all, it was going to be a unit of account. It was not going to be a currency. So the total of all Bancor was going to be zero. Because if you had a trade surplus, you'd accumulate a positive balance, a trade deficit, you get a negative balance. And then Keynes, as well as that part of it, so that you didn't have the capacity for one national currency to distort the whole global system, which is what the American dollar system has done. He also had penalty interest rates imposed on both surplus and deficit nations. So the whole intent Keynes had was to minimize trade deficits. But then you get the situation of countries like the Middle East, of course, because if you're exporting oil and everybody needs oil, you're going to not necessarily import enough back to have a balance of trade. So you'd have a permanent surplus on those countries. And then there'd be countries which are underdeveloped countries that have to import oil in the first instance to be able to produce goods anyway. They're likely to be in a permanent trade deficit situation. Keynes had it set up so that there'd be the interest rate that was charged on consistent deficit and consistent surplus nations would be distributed back to third world countries. So the idea was to stimulate demand out of that situation. So the penalty interest charge within the Bancor system would be paid to developing countries. And that could then enable them to pay for the oil in the first instance. So it was quite a clever system. I think, Mike, I'd like your impression of Bancor on that front in terms of a system dynamics. System.
Yeah. It's so Keynes, even if you look at the general theory or the Bancor system, was a systems thinker, and he thought about servo mechanisms, stabilizing unstable systems with negative feedback loops. He didn't say that, but that's essentially what's going on here. So anything gets out of whack, the system corrects and tries to stabilize it. So kudos to John Maynard.
Has the Bancor ever been modeled seriously to see the effects of that in action?
I don't know, Mac. Maybe you know your models of the Bancor idea?
I started making one some years ago. I got to finish it. I didn't what's his name over in Norway? We were on his PhD committee.
Oh, Trond Andresen. Trond.
Yeah, Trond. Wasn't he doing something like that?
He was into all sorts of control mechanisms, but I don't think he had much on the. I have to ask him. I mean, ages since I read that PhD thesis, so I'm a bit rusty on that whole front.
Yeah. Just to see if it acts like it, because you guys have impressed on me that most of the models we have are in our heads and they're very interesting, but until we get them modeled, you really don't know. You can make a good guess.
There's enough information in Keynes's papers to build a model, I think. Basic model to lay out the feedback loops.
Steve, didn't you a few months ago lay out something, a global currency through the Godley tables? I know it wasn't a system dynamic model, but it was something.
Well, it's system dynamics. The Godley tables are system dynamics, but I started modeling international trade within the euro region, because like one thing that I've had enough of pretending that I have any respect for the exports or a cost imports or a benefit argument of MMT on international trade. It's brain dead stupid, and I'm going to attack the shit out of it because I'm not going to let that become part of MMT in the long term if I can possibly prevent it. But part of that was looking at the argument they made that they basically wave their hands and say it doesn't matter what happens to the money side. We get the goods, they get the pieces of paper, therefore we come out ahead. That sort of logic. So I thought I'd actually look at the monetary consequences. And the difficulty of doing that in general is you've got to look at currency conversions, because if you're going to look at trade between the United States and China on that front, then you've got to have people converting American dollars into yuan and so on. And the complications there, what you got is a hand waving from Warren Mosley when I tried to raise those issues. So I thought, well, the beauty of the European system is all those countries are creating exactly the same currency. So there's no need to look at the currency conversion. I can look at what happens in trade between Germany and Italy, for example, when there's a export surplus for Germany. And what happens is money creation that's done by the Italian economy, creating euros in Italy, gets transferred to Germany. So the impact of a trade surplus for Germany on Italy is that Germany grows faster, Italy grows more slowly. And that happens instantaneously. As soon as you allow that there's a export surplus for Germany with Italy, and therefore a deficit with Italy with Germany, the rate of growth of Germany rises. So the whole idea that the importing country benefits is kicked in the balls immediately by the monetary side of that. And that's what's left out by MMT on that particular argument. So I've started doing it, but I've got to finish my book on climate change first. So that's finished. I might even post about it just to annoy the shit out of some people who behave in a cult over that thing on MMT. But I haven't finished writing it.
So a follow-up question from Frank Steve. Steve, if you go to a banker system, how would investors be able to take advantage of arbitrage? Bankers, speculators, and other powerful, wealthy people would not be happy. Steve, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the bank law cuts out the possibility of, not completely, but it cuts out a lot of the currency speculation we've seen. And like the whole idea is to prevent excessive trade surpluses and deficits. That was a major part of Keynes's argument. First of all, Keynes said that surplus nations benefit. So his a priori argument was that a country running a trade surplus benefits out of the trade surplus, and those running a deficit lose. That's the exact opposite of what Mosley has claimed. And I think Keynes is right and Mosley is wrong on that particular front. But it also means that you wouldn't have had the currency speculation side of things, because Keynes was going to limit how large deficits and surpluses were, and that meant there'd be less of this potential for speculative bubbles out of it as well. So I think it would reduce the potential for arbitrage gains, and in that case, yeah, the financial system which likes playing arbitrage would hate it.
Yeah, I wish I could get Warren on the show, but he's too much of a pussy to come on and debate you, Steve.
I haven't thrown a punch yet, just let him know that.
Yeah, well, he did say you lead with your chin. So.
I know. He hasn't felt my fist yet. That particular, it's a stupid argument, and I intend attacking the shit out of it. And I'll get into it really after July when I finish the book on neoclassicals and international and climate.
Okay. Dave, I play a game now on this show where I ask a question, an either or question, and basically what I have to say to you right now, Dave, is cricket or baseball?
Cricket.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Are you serious? Okay, right. So I thought I gave you Americans the benefit of the doubt, not you particularly, Ty, obviously, but Americans generally, the benefit of the doubt. We went to New York in 2024, and we went to the Mets, and it was the most god-awful experience. I'm not even joking. It was ridiculous. So I thought cricket was boring. But you go to a baseball match and most of the game is bullshit entertainment of people coming on and doing some little dance or whatever, and then someone trots out to first base and then they have another break. It was
okay. I gotta stop you. Even as a Canadian, and I know it's America's pastime, which by the way, Venezuela took away from them, just like the U.S. took away their president. But anyways, that's another story. Baseball, you are correct. At the beginning of a season, it's not like hockey where you can watch game one of the regular season and it's action-packed. It's enjoyable. Baseball gets really, really exciting when each pitch, there's something on the line. When it's in the playoff stretch, the atmosphere, if you've gone to a Blue Jays game, is through. You can feel the stadium shake, and it's I agree with you part way. But if you are saying cricket is more entertaining than baseball,
one-day cricket is
that is
absolutely
fucking
brilliant.
bullshit.
No,
That is
one-day cricket.
bullshit.
You're
No,
thinking
look, no,
5-day.
hang on. I'm going
I
to
said it
side
was
with
less
Ty on
boring.
this. No, cricket, the original cricket was 5-day test cricket. I mean, the reason they introduced the one-day game was to make it more exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was boring as batshit.
By the way,
going
I'm
to a
not
cricket.
supporting cricket. I'm saying it's less boring than baseball. They're both boring. So
This
All
is
right.
great. I like having you here for this game. This is going to be, you need to come more often on Fridays so we can play.
So I
enjoy shit stirring questions, obviously.
Mike, hang gliding or personal Cessna plane flying enjoyment. I kind of butchered that, but you know what I mean.
I've done neither. I guess flying the Cessna is safer. So go with that, and you probably go farther.
So would you have more fun just having your pilot's license and flying a small single-engine Cessna plane around, or would you have more fun jumping off the cliff of a mountain and hang gliding?
No, I would be less terrified and hence having more fun in the Cessna. The other thing sounds nuts.
Steve, I am still disturbed by Dave's answer, and I want more clarification here. Cricket or baseball?
No, I've got one for Steve.
I think self-immolation.
Do they play cricket in Australia? Is that a thing in Australia?
I had to play cricket as a kid, okay? And I literally, because cricket and football were the two sports you had to do as a kid in Australia. So very similar to you in New Zealand, Dave, for the sports you had to do, cricket or football?
Cricket or rugby, that's the only choice. I don't think
cricket
there's any
during
other
summer
sport.
and rugby league or union during winter. That was the thing. And like I got cricket, it's exciting for the bowler. It's exciting for the batter. It's exciting for the wicket keeper. You can fall asleep in the bloody and in the fields when you're supposed to be out there to catch a ball. Like I was, always been an egghead, as you can imagine. I was Olympic weightlifting, tennis playing, marathon running, cycling egghead, but nonetheless, cricket. I remember the one game of cricket. There's two games I remember. One, this is in primary school, and I'm in the field, and I've completely, my mind is off somewhere else, and suddenly a ball comes to me, and I hit it with my hand. So that got me a lot of opprobrium from the jocks in the class. Mind you, these are jocks who were 12 years old. Then the next time I played cricket, we were stuck with some sporting activity, and we dragged out to actually a field near where I used to live in Centennial Park, and I was bored shitless waiting for my turn to bat. And finally, the captain of my team, who was a mate of mine at school, said, "Keen, you've got the next bat." Oh, okay. So I hit 4 consecutive fours because cricket is like tennis, and like I was a top class tennis player, so hitting 4 fours in a row. So I won the game at the end there. But I was bored shitless waiting, 4 hits of the ball, won the game, couldn't wait to get back home. Boring as batshit.
When you hit the ball, do you have to run or you just stand there after you hit it?
Well, if you hit it far enough, you hit a 4, you don't have to run. So you start running, and then if it makes the boundary, you get a 4. Oh. So I hit 4 consecutive 4s.
Aussie rules or American football?
Aussie rules.
Yeah, definitely.
That is Aussie rules is an absolutely, my sound seems to have gone, but Aussie rules is an absolutely beautiful game. And in fact, it creates probably the best looking athletes on the planet, which is another thing you can say.
Yeah, it's a cross between rugby players and basketball players.
The physique is gorgeous. I think I'm not gay at all, but in terms of male physiques that are worth looking at, the physiques of Aussie rules players versus the physiques of rugby league versus baseball versus cricket. If you want a good-looking athlete, you watch Aussie rules.
It wasn't
I would correct you. So Marie, my beautiful partner, really likes baseball players' backsides.
What about you, Ty?
What about me? I would say that hockey players have the most balanced physiques. Our female hockey players here in Canada are if I was gay, our male hockey players, beautiful specimens, as Coach Don Cherry would say, just beautiful. You just want to bring them in and kiss them right on the cheek. So I would have to say hockey players.
But Aussie Rules was the craziest sport to watch. So we lived there for 10 years, and my boy, when he was 5 or 6, the Aussie Rules culture is now all over Australia, and they are very good at inculcating kids into it. And so I, as a Kiwi, I'd never watched it. So when
sounds like a cult.
It is a cult. It's brilliant. And so my boy started playing when he was 5 or 6. He loved it. And I never understood the rules. It didn't matter. It's so much fun to watch. And then you go and watch a professional game after that. And honestly, it is the weirdest, bestest, craziest thing. I promise you could watch it, don't have to know what's going on, and love it. Unlike American football, where, again, like baseball, it all takes too long. This game is on all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think, like, in terms of, like, I played rugby league at school, and I hated it. I played football, I hated it. Played tennis, loved it, obviously. But in terms of objectively looking at football games, soccer is much more interesting and exciting, I think, than rugby league or rugby union. But Aussie Rules is more exciting again. It's quite a remarkable game to watch. So and I never played it, but in terms of if I had to sit and watch a football game, I'd happily make that Aussie Rules to watch. The other games, I get bored shitless and don't want to watch them.
I like the videos of the women, either rugby or Aussie Rules football from New Zealand, when they do that hakama at the beginning.
Are you sure the women do opponents? I have to look that up. I didn't know the Kiwi teams did that, because it's supposed to be a very blokey thing.
The women, they have the women doing it. Yeah, I've seen it.
Right.
I was like, it's like crazy looking.
I have more sports ones, but I'm gonna save them for next week. I just got a bunch in my head. But Mike, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, he's thinking about it.
I haven't seen the latest ones. I saw the original 3, and I like those better than Star Trek. On the other hand, I took over at WPI from Thad Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry's first cousin, and they were tight. So and he looked just like Gene Roddenberry. So we had every Star Trek story. So hard to say. If you mean the original 3 Star Wars, I guess I'll go with those. But I haven't seen the most recent ones.
I'm a Star Trekkie.
Okay.
But, the second show, Jean-Luc Picard, not what's his name, but Jean-Luc Picard and Voyager. They were the 2 that I was addicted to, and they're philosophical shows. The thing is, the script writing in Star Trek was all about philosophy and intriguing situations. Star Trek is a dumbed down version of Dune. It's exciting, it's a lot of fun, but the Star Wars is a dumbed down.
All I remember was at the end of the first or the second, maybe the second one, when Darth Vader said, "Luke, I am your father." Oh my God.
Yeah, there's some good theater in there, without a doubt. But in terms of philosophy and what's intriguing to watch and interesting episodes, then Star Trek definitely.
Star
Trek, not Star Wars.
Dave, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars. I mean, but most people think it's supposed to be this saga that's a space opera so much, but it's about family. I mean, it really is. That Luke, I'm your father. It's about being in family, being in tribes, being a deeply spiritual core to it. Empire Strikes Back is up there in my top 10 of all-time greatest films, because like maybe Back to the Future or maybe Pulp Fiction, it is a perfect film. Like, every scene is perfect. Everything is perfect for it. So it tops Star Trek. It's Empire Strikes Back is a classic of classics as far as sci-fi goes, I reckon.
I will say the original 1960 Star Trek, the women officers and yeomen and so forth on the Enterprise had better uniforms than.
Hey, what was with the future?
Actually, Mike, in the first few seasons of Next Generation, they had quite revealing. Remember,
let's not forget 11 of 9.
Counselor Troy. She had a very high skirt in the first season.
Oh, in 9, was it 9? was that her name? There was a
No,
Oh, 7 of 9. Voyager, 7 of 9. Yes, she
7
was
of 9 is a name, and 11 of 9 was a nickname.
No, I can see where this is
bonus
going
points
now.
for that. So
All right, bonus points. Yeah,
bonus
yeah.
point.
At least 2 bonus points.
But I remember Seinfeld remarking that the future seemed to be, everybody's dressed in the same uniform. We've run out of ideas with fashion. It's just simpler if we can all just wear the same thing now. And I always thought it was funny. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. Why is everyone wearing, even in the cities, they're all wearing the same stuff? Mind you, we kind of ended up that everyone wears either denim and a t-shirt. Is pretty much the postmodern thing for the last 30 years. So maybe we're ending up there.
Final one for this stream, and I'll start with Mike because I think I know the answer, but I might be wrong. Living in the woods and mountains or living on the ocean?
Woods and mountains.
Okay, that's what I thought. I guessed right. And I'll just put it out there. And so this is a conflict between Marie and I. We're actually going out to Tofino next week, which is on the ocean. And I grew up on Vancouver Island. It's just not a big deal to be on the ocean anymore. I love going into the Rockies. I love going on the side of a glacier. I love the woods. I love the fresh smell. So I'm definitely a woods and like interior, kind of BC interior Rocky Mountain area.
Awesome. Yeah,
Dave, same question.
I love ocean and swimming. I would be by the sea anytime. So in fact, that's one of my big ambitions in life is to get semi-retired to a coastal area, as I love it. So yeah, it's not that I don't love the mountains. That's a nice visit. But yeah, if I was living every day, getting up near the sea, brilliant. Love it.
Steve, same thing.
I'm an ocean boy. I was born in Sydney. I thought everybody went surfing on a Saturday and checked out the women as you went on the beach and caught body surf waves and stuff like that. So that's my deep background. And I think the other intriguing thing about, like, in terms of humanity, there's a good argument, which you would see, and I've forgotten the actual author, but a good argument that humans evolved as a species because we grew up as an ape that was comfortable with water. And that
was premature.
If you had a premature, whatever that premature was, it wasn't me. But yeah, the humans evolved as a species because we were a water-dwelling ape. And like a whole lot of things about our physiology, there are arguments you can only explain our physiology and potentially our intelligence from the fact we grew up in water.
I love that.
Yeah. So like humans, people often say humans grew up and we evolved because we could chase the other animals on the plains. But if they're running on plains, we've got the world's worst feet for running on plains. Okay? We have feet which is flat. Which doesn't have insulation in terms of padding or hooves and stuff like that. Maybe we're running on sand instead. Okay, running on sand, our feet make eminent sense in sand. Where we have sex facing each other most of the time. If you have sex from the end, the female drowns. Okay, so. There are evolutionary biological arguments as to why.
Wait. We're having sex facing each other because we were doing it in the water, facing each other.
Yeah, otherwise you drown.
Not tracking.
I'm trying to put the.
It's got slightly unscientific, but I love it.
Out, the puppets out. We'll try and figure.
I want to know who is doing the science on this.
I've forgotten the author's name, but the Descent of Woman, like one of the arguments in I think it was Descent of Man is one of the books that's associated with Darwin. Okay, but there's a Descent of Woman and argues that our intelligence came out of interpersonal relations more than anything else.
I thought you said Descent of a Woman with
that's what I heard. Yeah,
that's what I heard too.
Okay. Not, yeah, I know them. I don't know that particular movie, but there's a strong argument, whether it's ever going to be properly supported or not, that our evolution involved a period where we were water-based, and that may have been
to be true, though. I do.
We were forced into, like, we could have been a weak element of the simian species that got driven, and all we could survive in was on a water area where the other apes wouldn't go. Gorillas hate water. Most chimpanzees hate water. We're the weird ape that enjoys going into the water. And there's something about our species, and there are other elements of our behavior come down to water being a critical part of our evolution and development.
Yeah, give me ocean anytime.
Yeah.
Well,
so 2 by 2 ocean.
The ocean and woods, and Steve turned it into something completely different. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so we're together forever. Leave some comments underneath the video if you have any questions about what we discussed in the show. I will try to get back to you. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
You are now relearning economics.